Many settings can change on a reverb, affecting its overall sound. But today, we'll be concentrating on the settings that affect the overall clarity or muddiness of a mix. By adjusting these effects and solving issues before they even get started, we can give our mix depth and clarity. So let's take a look. Please smash that like button and subscribe. Now, before we get into reverb settings that can reduce muddiness and increase clarity, let's talk about the most common reason that muddiness exists when using reverb. And this is that someone either uses too much reverb or too many reverbs. And these choices generally come from a misunderstanding of what reverb actually is and was actually designed to do. Reverbs create a space much like the one you are sitting in right now for sound to exist within. This can create depth in a mix, but with context. Many people think that throwing a reverb on everything or a bunch of reverbs on everything creates depth in their mix. But what it really creates is a giant, flat, muddy mess. Because in order for us to perceive depth, our mind needs a point of reference in which to base that depth off of. If you don't have a sound that's close to your face and extremely direct, how will you be able to tell how far away or the depth of those indirect sounds that are created by a reverb? Especially if there's the confusion of a ton of different rooms and a ton of different reverbs all colliding with each other with no good points of reference. To combat this, use minimal reverbs, and when you do, use it with purpose. If you're going to use a lot of reverb, know the settings we're going to talk about further in order to choose smart settings that are going to work with your project, and avoid interlacing reverbs, but if you do, use reverbs that'll work with each other, like plate reverbs or spring reverbs that tend to play nice with others. I have an example I created here using 2 somatic samples, and I've already set up a reverb track for the vocal with problems for us to solve. So let's take a listen.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town? I'm saying, love her if you wanna go, I'm down. Darling, we were made for bigger things. And this place keeps killing our dreams.
So, first thing we're going to talk about is pre-delay. So I've got 2 delays here, one that's going to keep the original settings and one that I'm going to change so that we can see the contrast from where we came from to where we go. So let's turn off the original, turn on the next one. And we're just going to increase the pre-delay. And I want you to see the clarity that starts happening.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town? I'm saying, love her if you wanna go, I'm down.
Versus the original.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town? I'm saying.
So, before and after. Before.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town? I'm saying, love her if you wanna go, I'm down.
After.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town? I'm saying, love her if you wanna go, I'm down.
So you should have been able to notice it open up and add a little bit of clarity. The enunciation in the words should have been a little bit better, and there should have been less clashing with the words overall. Next, we're going to talk about decay times. Now, your decay really only needs to be as long as the gap between your words. Here, if I'm playing this, I'll solo.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town? I'm saying, love her if you wanna go, I'm down.
And as you'll see, that's what we've got.
And this place keeps killing our dreams.
Okay, we'll listen to that in context, and I'll start turning it back down, and you will notice an increase in clarity.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town? I'm saying, love her if you wanna go, I'm down.
we will A-B.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town? I'm saying, love her if you wanna go, I'm down.
Okay, we'll run it again with the new one.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town? I'm saying, love her if you wanna go, I'm down.
Awesome. You want the reverb to fill the space and gaps between what someone is saying, but not to overpower to the point of where you're causing mud. When I had the time jacked up, you'd be like, well, most people wouldn't set that there anyways. But what some people will do is they'll have the time jacked up like that and then just turn the reverb down in its mixer channel to compensate for the loudness of all those reflections bouncing around from the reverb. Now, speaking on all those reflections bouncing around in the reverb, we'll talk about diffusion. Having a boxy room can create a buildup of frequencies, which can be problematic. However, diffusion is going to break these straight perpendicular paths up and bounce sound around in more of a washed feeling, which means less frequency buildup. So if we give a listen and increase our diffusion,
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town? I'm saying, love her if you wanna go, I'm down.
this time instead of A being from the original reverb we started with to the new one, I'm just going to A-B the difference in the diffusion alone. With no diffusion,
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town?
with diffusion.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town?
You should have been able to hear that the reverb just, it became less boxy sounding, less problematic. Don't quite know how to describe it. It just became more of a wash and less resonant, which this resonant sound is something that you can always go for and might fit perfect in your project. But any building up of frequencies is going to clash with other frequencies, which can create your muddiness or your other problems. So now that we've done that, we're going to talk about damping. Damping is actually how absorptive, if that's even a word, the room is to a certain section of frequency content. A bed, for example, is going to dampen sounds more than a block of wood. Bass traps are a form of damping. Foam acoustical pads are a form of damping, both affecting different ranges of frequencies. So if we'll go to this reverb, we'll see that I added a whole buildup over here in lower frequencies by increasing this here. By increasing instead of reducing, I'm actually multiplying the lower frequencies, and therefore I'm creating more clashing in that frequency range. I have also gave a little boost here in the low mids and my EQ for the instrumental in order to help create some clashing and some problems. So if we come here, I'll bring this up and you should be able to hear it reflecting more of the low end on our reverb.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town? I'm saying, love her if you wanna go, I'm down. 'Cause darling, we were made for bigger things.
And as you'll see when I brought it down, those reflections went away. They became absorbed more. Same with the high end.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town?
Versus being more absorptive. So if I bring the high end up to something I like, there's more room in the high end. There is more high end instruments, so I have to be cautious of that. I should get a good tone. And then I can bring the low end down so that I don't add too much frequency content in ranges that can create mud. So
let's go, love. I'm saying, ain't you tired of waiting? We could leave this whole place behind, yeah.
okay, well, A-B, so far, how far we've came from the original reverb to the reverb we have now.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town? I'm saying, Love it if you wanna go, I'm down. Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town. I'm saying, love it if you wanna go, I'm down.
And as you'll see, we've created the same size room with different reflective values to create a more clear reverb, one better suited for our mix. The next option we have is some EQ. There's an EQ in here. I moved these to about where I want the cutoffs at. Then I came in and did an actual EQ of our reverb. I heard a little bit too much high end coming in from the reverb, occupying space that wasn't really occupied by anything else, creating an odd contrast I didn't like. I usually like things that have less depth to be brighter, because things that are closer are brighter, things that are farther away are usually a little bit more dull. And then I made a cut in the low mid here where you see I made a boost in our instrumental. And that is also where a lot of this vocal is living if you pay attention.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town.
A lot of strength in the low mid. We had a lot of buildup there. So if you listen, just adding this EQ makes a huge difference. We'll do it before and after.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town.
After.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town. I'm saying, love it if you wanna go, I'm down.
I'll change it while it's playing.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town. I'm saying, love it if you wanna go, I'm down. 'Cause darling, we were made for bigger things.
Right? And because I did subtractive EQ, this also accounts for a bit of a subtraction in volume. Before I added the EQ, I felt my reverb was a little bit too loud. Now, and after we continue processing, I might turn it up. We'll see as we keep going. Now, the next thing we'll do is some side chaining. We can side chain for clarity. So to do this, I'll use Waves F6 because I love this thing. I'll open 2 of them just because I can. I'll add one for the instrumental. My first Waves F6 will be for the vocal. And I want to go to the low mids because that's where we had a lot of buildup. And as I play this,
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town.
we can see some metering here for the vocals.
I'm saying,
I will also do one somewhere around where you get the sibilants for enunciation. And based off what I'm hearing now, I'll turn this up.
tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town. I'm saying,
Give a little bit more balance back to the lower end, because now that it's ducking out of the way, it's not fighting so much with the vocals. I still feel like it's too bright. I'm gonna turn the high end down.
tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town. I'm saying, love it if you wanna go, I'm down.
Sounds a lot better to me. Next, I have the instrumental, and I'm just gonna get rid of some over here in the low mids to help clear this up a bit.
This place keeps killing our dreams. Let's go, love. I'm saying, ain't you tired?
So, if we listen to our reverb before we added the side chaining and after, we should hear a huge difference.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town.
Versus,
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town.
we're still catching that tail, but we're moving it out of the way beforehand. It's a lot more subtle and sounds really good. Now, let's listen to the reverb where we came from to the reverb we're at.
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town. I'm saying, love it if you wanna go, I'm down.
Compared to,
Tell me, babe, you wanna leave this town.
matter of fact, I'm going to gain stage these a little bit. Now that they're gain staged a little bit closer, we'll move to the faster part where it's going to get more colliding content, and we'll do a before and an after.
Oh, love, I'm saying, ain't you tired of waiting? We could leave this whole place behind, yeah. And let's
After.
I'm saying, ain't you tired of waiting? We could leave this whole place behind, yeah.
Way cleaner of a reverb, way less competition and fighting. It sounds great, but it doesn't just stop there. What if we're using multiple reverbs? Well, if we're using multiple reverbs, you can see how, based off what we had to do with that one reverb, things can get muddy very quick. But there's some reverbs that are clearer than others. A good reverb that plays well with others, but isn't always the best choice, is a spring reverb. Spring reverb, based off the name, is going to sound kind of springy. And this does not sound that great very often, thus you don't hear about it often, but this is a type of reverb you can add to a guitar, or you can add lightly to some vocals to help bring some life, but you probably shouldn't use a lot of. So if we were to add a hall reverb to the instrumental, and then compare that to something like a spring, you'll hear the difference. Okay, so I've loaded 3 types of reverbs to this instrumental. First one's first, we're gonna do a hall.
I'm saying, ain't you tired of waiting? We could leave this whole place behind.
If I turn it off, you'll hear how much things clear up. So off.
I'm saying, ain't you tired of waiting? We could leave this whole place.
You notice instantly when I turn it on, things get a lot more muddy and less clear. If we add a spring reverb,
I'm saying, ain't you tired of waiting? We could leave this whole place behind.
you'll hear we got a more tangy high end, a little bit more of a twang. And this is because spring reverbs are springy. So we'll do again hall, and we'll A-B it with the spring.
I'm saying, ain't you tired of waiting? We could leave this whole place behind, yeah. I'm saying, ain't you tired of waiting? We could leave this whole place behind, yeah.
Instant clarity, because the spring reverb plays nice with other reverbs, which is why I loaded a plate afterwards. The plate is going to play nice with other reverbs as well. So if we give the plate a listen,
I'm saying, ain't you tired of waiting? We could leave this whole place behind, yeah.
And we can make changes in that plate, much like we made changes in our hall to make it more clear. However, I want you to notice if we A-B the plate with the hall, we'll get some clarity. It's just like we did with the spring reverb. So hall first, plate second. Let's A-B.
I'm saying, ain't you tired? I'm saying, ain't you tired?
So the plate is a good middle ground between our spring and something like a hall. If we want to leave that plate reverb and make these play together even more well, we could change the vocal reverb from something less warm to something like a chamber. Chambers are made to give the big feeling like a hall, but are more transparent. So I can change between our hall or a chamber without actually changing any of these settings below, and you'll hear a difference when we A-B. So if I go with a chamber,
I'm saying, ain't you tired of waiting? We could leave this whole place behind, yeah.
Versus a hall.
I'm saying, ain't you tired of waiting? We could leave this whole place behind, yeah.
Right? And if you notice, that hall feels warmer and the chamber feels more clear, a little bit brighter, and more transparent. And the reason why something like a chamber is going to work better is because the hall gets its warmth from the way it reverberates those lower mid frequencies. It's made to make things sound huge and warm and powerful because it imitates a concert hall, somewhere where you would have an orchestra playing or have an opera or have a one-man show playing piano and singing a song with a huge audience where they want the sound to be huge. So although we'd probably have to dial our chamber back in to make it sound the way we would want it to sound, going to a chamber can make space for having a reverb on another track. But what you should never do is go, I want this to sound huge, I'm going to throw reverbs everywhere without knowing these kinds of things. And much like I said, a hall is used when you have a single singer or an orchestra. You should think of it that way when you're mixing. Is a hall really the right choice for a busy instrumental? But enough about that. We've A-B'd where we started to where we got to, and I've explained to you what we've done every step of the way. And with all of that, I think mission accomplished, and that's about it. So in summary, if we know our purpose, we could choose the right reverb and right settings to prevent muddiness in the first place. Pre-delay clears up the source sound. Diffusion is going to stop frequency buildup. We can change the tail of our reverb shorter so there's not much of it going on to interrupt the sounds we have playing. And we can use damping and EQ to help manage frequency buildup or anything that might clash with other frequencies we have playing within our mix. And to top off all the clarity that we can get just from those things, we can sidechain the reverb when certain instruments are playing to further avoid clashing and continue to add more clarity. If you like this video, please like this video. If you have any comments, please comment. I always appreciate a subscribe. It's Warren with Scale Audio, and adios.